there's nothing that any one of us can do to assure that our loved ones and even ourselves are not victims of violent acts, victims of police brutality, victims of continuous oppression that we face as people of color, and particularly Black people.
If you believe we can change the narrative, if you believe we can change our communities, if you believe we can change the outcomes, then we can change the world. I'm Rob Richardson. Welcome to Disruption Now. Welcome to Disruption Now. I'm your host and moderator, Rob Richardson. With me is my pleasure to have Tamika Mallory. It's been a long time coming. We've had this done like a year ago. It was early March, but a lot happened between mid-March.
A lot happened.
Right. And
a lot happened.
Right. Things happen as they're supposed to. But since then, I would say she's always been in the movement. She's always been committed. And she's been there since her beginning, really. Since she was a working professional, it was all about the movement. And now everybody knows what I know and what some of her friends know is that she's about the business. And she had the viral speech right after the killing of George Floyd, and she's been active. She's been on the ground and she's been fighting. And it's great just to have her here. Tamika, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Robin. I just want to publicly say that you're probably one of the most persistent people that I have ever encountered. Every time we have been, and I don't think it's persistent just for persistence sake. I think it is because you understand what all of us need to be doing in terms of conversations and educating people. And, you have given me such grace to allow me to, tell you I'm going to be on and then not check with my people and all those great things. And today, although I'm traveling internationally, I wanted to stop and do this because I actually have the time. And also because I think that the platform that you have and what it is that you're trying to do with your podcast, your show, your network that I believe you're building is super important. So I'm happy to be with you today and just thank you again for having grace with my time.
Well, no, thank you. And again, I try to give people grace because I understand. So, and I work to be persistent and also have patience. There's a balance. It's the balance, right? Is what you got to do. But thank you. As we talked about, when we were about to get up, we were about to do this a year ago.
Yeah.
The world just changed and the world's changed so much. So, and you're now, you were known then, but you're really, really well known now. And so in that moment really helped elevate what you were doing already. I tell people this is not something you jumped into let me be a part of this because there's something going on. This is what you were doing.
Absolutely. And
you've been involved for a long time, but let's talk about why you got involved. What was your genesis? What was your beginning? Why are you doing this work? Because you are very talented and you could have made your way a lot of other ways. Why are you doing this?
Yeah, I think it's really personal. I tell people all the time that in a lot of ways I have some selfish reasons for being in this movement. For one, I have a 21, he's about to be 22-year-old son.
You do?
And
wow.
I think,
okay.
Yeah, and I think a part of the work that I do is really a fear, if you will, a serious concern for the idea that if we don't change laws, if we do not create a new culture, he could fall victim to the very things that I fight against every single day. And there's nothing that any one of us can do to assure that our loved ones and even ourselves are not victims of violent acts, victims of police brutality, victims of continuous oppression that we face as people of color, and particularly Black people. None of us can stop those things from happening. Those things, I believe, are, it's a long line and a long history that is going to take us probably beyond my lifetime and yours to solve. But the one thing that I want is for people to see me in the fight and be able to say that despite the fact that it's not guaranteed that I can stop it, but at least I put my foot in the water. At least I, was in the game. At least I attempted to make a difference. And so whatever happens from there, it just is what it is. It just is what it is. Yeah. But so
and when you put yourself out there, let me just interject real quick. When you put yourself out there as a leader, you will get criticized. I would tell people this, no matter what, it's a part of the process. And I know you understand that. And now that you have even a heightened status in terms of just exposure, it's picked up. And, I wanted to definitely talk about that because as I told you, I support you. I do, but there's been things that have been going on with with people that we respect. We're not going to say anything negative about, particularly some of the people that we know were victims of police brutality and they lost their sons, and some of them have spoken out and are saying things that I don't believe to be true. But I want you to respond about you using this movement to just enrich yourselves. Before you answer, let me just say my personal perspective here. I think we have to get out of the narrative, particularly Black people, as thinking that the only way someone can contribute to the movement is they have to be broke during the whole process. Like you can't have some means to do that. Dr. Martin Luther King actually spoke to this, and he talked about love and power. He said, look, power without love is reckless and abusive, but love without power is just sentimental and anemic. The thing is, you need resources in order to do things. Clearly. This is how the world works. And there's nothing wrong with having resources and not being broke, and saying, like, we have to, I think, get out of the mindset to say that you're not Black enough if you're not poor. Like, that's not part of our narrative. That's somebody else's narrative. But that's my point.
Right. That's right. So, that's right. I mean,
I know I said a lot.
I think first of all, as long as there's breath in my body and my limbs work, and if my limbs stop working and only my mouth works, I'm still going to use it. And I'm going to use it for two things. I'm going to use it always to raise awareness about the major challenges, the critical things that Black people are dealing with in this country and around the world. That's not going to change. Much of my activism and the work that I do every day, it's not something that I can turn off and on like a light switch. It is a calling for me. And I feel like, when I hear people say, step out the way or stop doing what you're doing, I chuckle because I don't think that they realize that there have been more than enough attempts to move me, to silence me, to
there's been a whole lot of attempts.
Several attempts. And guess what? Every single time, God continues to place me back where he wants me to be. And I can't even say back because I don't think there was probably a time that I ever wasn't there, except the fact that it does hurt. But every single time that people come after me, that there are these major attacks, and I've had some big ones. I've had some things that have really, really hurt.
People said you were anti-Semitic. I remember all that stuff.
Absolutely. So I've dealt with some things, and I also work for a man in Reverend Sharpton who dealt with major attacks as well. And you can say whatever you want about any of us. There's not going to be a chorus of people. I mean, well, there is. Of course, there are many people who love, appreciate, respect, and honor the work that I do. But there's not going to be a what do you call it? A critical mass, right? There's always going to be people who say, well, I don't like what she does. I don't like the way she dresses. I don't like the things she says. I don't like. That's always going to be the case. But I feel like where we have to land, if you will, or what we have to drill down on is this idea that I am not here to do this work because someone likes me. In fact, every single day, as you spoke about my speech for George Floyd and other things that I've done, I put myself in positions where people really don't like me. And while there are some haters that speak about me on the sidelines, there are other people who are really trying to take my life. Like, we know that I deal with, even during this period, I'm not sure if the individuals that are involved in, and there are many more people. Of course, there are moms. There's one mom in particular who has spoken against me in the press. I think another joined her. But it really has just been those individuals, because if you look at my record and the families that I've worked with, from Trayvon Martin's mother, Sabrina Fulton, to Breonna Taylor's mother, Tamika Palmer, to Ramarley Graham's mother, Constance Malcolm, and the list goes on and on. Those individuals are extremely supportive of me, and they will tell you that the things that are being said about me are just not true. I mean, that's just the reality. There are opinions and then there's facts. And in terms of this idea that I use people's children to raise money or to elevate myself, and that I, show up to steal narratives and then travel across the country using a person's name and not showing back up for the families, those things are absolutely, absolutely not true. It's not me. And there are people who do those things. But
that's why I made it clear. Like, there are people that, let's get it clear. There are people that pimp this game.
Absolutely.
And I just say you're not one of those people. So I understand how people have this belief. And I also think
and those people, though, it's almost like, people want to say within the police department, well, I'm not a bad cop. But the point of the matter is that there are people who are harming folks who are police officers. And if you are not speaking out against it, then to some folks, it's almost like you are co-signing or a complicit. I do speak out against what is considered to be fake activism. But
and there's a lot of that too. That's a lot. That's a real thing.
It's a real thing. But again, when you think about my background and you understand what it is that I've done, my track record is clear. So that's the first thing. I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing. Yeah. And, I have many opportunities and things that I'm dealing with in situations that I'm vetting. And I won't be stopping anytime soon. But the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm not going to, I hope, if God continues to bless me and continues to elevate my voice and just me in general, I'm not going to die broke. I'm not going to die in a situation where,
and nor should you.
Similar to what happened to Malcolm X, where they could not even find a funeral home in Harlem to be able to bury him, the place that he helped and was from. Dr. King, while his family at this point, because of his grand celebrity and the impact that he had on society, there are resources, but nonetheless.
But he did die. But let's be clear, he had died broke. He died broke.
He died broke.
He died broke, and I know that this is you can tell by how he was speaking, both him and Malcolm, that they would have made a pivot had they had the opportunity. Malcolm, I mean, Martin was talking about economics in our community. That was literally what he got killed for. He was talking about economics.
Absolutely.
Malcolm was always about that. And
I think from my perspective, Rob, I'm a pretty smart, not that they weren't, but I'm a pretty smart young woman.
Right. And we learn from their history, from our ancestors.
Right. Absolutely. And some people say I'm attractive and I have assets, if you will, in terms of what I've learned. And as you said, being a student of history. And so I have many different forms of income. And by the way, what people don't seem to understand is that the least amount of money that I make is from my activism. Yep. Literally, my activism is the least amount of my income. My income comes from being a consultant and working with people. And of course, around the areas of diversity, sometimes event planning, other skills that I have. My income also comes from being a speaker.
I also want to say this, even if it costs money to do the work you do.
It does.
Even if you got money in terms of you being an executive director, that is not a bad thing. We can't look at things like because someone is getting some income, like you need let me put it this way. Jewish organizations, they have executive directors and nobody apologizes for them making money.
That's right.
The Red Cross, you go out there, they do good work. I want everybody to Google how much the
CEOs of many of these organizations.
And I'm not saying we should get to that level, but I'm saying a point that we have to, only in our community is the perspective is how much money are you making? If you're making too much, then you must be doing something wrong. And that shouldn't be the only
traumatized. We're so traumatized. And also we've been taught habits and there are certain behaviors that have been thrust upon our communities to keep us divided, also to keep us feeling as if we are less than, as if we're not allowed to have more. We're not allowed to to feel good about ourselves and to have the resources to live well. But as a Black woman, and the reason why I was stating all of the different ways in which I make money, and of course, my organization, Until Freedom, pays me a salary. I put all those things together. It's like a soup. I make up, and by the way, there are highs and lows.
Of course.
There are moments when I'm making money, and then there's moments when, people are not doing as many events, right? During the pandemic, things changed. And so you have to kind of be willing to go with the punches. And, just in the beginning of 2020, I literally had to send out a text message to several of my friends and ask them to send money because I did not have enough money to decide between my mortgage payments or my rent payment. It is our mortgage payment for our family home. My car note and food. Like, it literally was a thing. And I have friends that will tell you, and in fact, I have the message where I said, you guys are always asking me how you can help. I never, ask you for anything, but right now I'm struggling and I need support. So that was, at one point, and then, things got better, and it goes around in cycles. Yeah. And I'm saying all of that to say that we've been told as women that we need 7 forms of income in order to make up what it takes to be successful, right? And so I live my life through that lens. But what I will tell you,
and I want to say that you can get back to that point, but I think the important lesson in what you just brought up is that it has not been a linear process for you. Like, this is like, people they saw you at the Grammys. They're like, oh, she's just up there and it just went instant. No, these are struggles to get.
It's a long time coming. And that's why so many people were actually, literally in tears to see me there, because they know what I've been through in order to make it into those spaces. Well, let me just go back to the point about make the income piece. So it takes these 7, I try to study some of the models of these finance gurus that talk about the 7 different types of income, right? But it's tiring. Can you imagine what it's like to have this, to work on panels and discussions? Like, most people, they just go to their regular job every day, and maybe, other small, different extracurricular activities. But in my situation, I have multiple full-time jobs, and I mean full-time, where people's lives depend on me to show up and to do what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. So if I'm planning a major event for someone, I don't get to not show up for Breonna Taylor's family just because I have this event going on. I have to be in both places at once. And so folks have no idea of the toll and the stress and how difficult it is in order for us to do what it is that we do every day and to survive. And I do not subscribe and will never, ever, ever be a person that agrees with the sentiment that we should be, as you said, broke in order to prove ourselves as activists, that we should not have nice things. I believe it's the opposite. I think that people who put their lives on the line, people who work hard every day on behalf of basic strangers, people you don't even know, that you're showing up for and putting yourself in very difficult and dangerous situations, we ought to be some of the most blessed. It's almost like, is it that we pay teachers so little and then we pay doctors so much, but yet the teachers teach the doctors, And so there's an imbalance, and that imbalance has been created. It's been designed because we know that when there is scarcity, when people are struggling, suffering, and just when people are haters in general, some of them, you have a situation where, there's like this, there's the I guess as my partner, my son will say, it's the crabs in the barrel mentality.
That's it.
Where you feel like when one crab gets out, maybe they're not coming back. So that's my thing on that. And the other little piece I was going to say is that when people say, well, oh my, they're so proud I made it to the Grammys. I think what folks don't understand is it's not so much the glitz and glam of it. The issue is that I am considered to be a very controversial person, right? I am not invited in every room. there are many rooms where people do not feel comfortable having me there because I'm a truth teller and some of the things that I have to say is not politically correct. So to have me on a stage like the Grammys after making a speech, which, by the way, the speech that I made in Minneapolis, and of course the subsequent speech where I literally call out Daniel Cameron in the hardest way that I could find within my soul. Those were speeches that were not just speeches for the books, but actually the words that I said, the things that I talked about as it relates to Target and the rioting, if you will, the uprising that was happening. Those things have made me a target. They have made people extremely angry. And so when standing on the Grammy stage and calling on Joe Biden, right? We all said we want to hold him accountable. Well, I held him accountable before an audience of tens and tens of millions of people.
That actually brings up a good question for me. You talked about during the last president, I don't even want to say his name, but you talked about like the fact that people were obsessed with just who they didn't like. And you quoted Dr. Martin Luther King to say, we fight systems of oppression and not people we don't agree with. Why do you think it's important to make that distinction? I think that.
Well, first of all, those are principles, Kingian nonviolence principles that I've learned from Dr. King. They're the principles that he studied. In those principles, they tell you that the fight is not against your other people, right? Other humans. The fight is against principalities. It's against systems and structures. And I think what's happening even in the press as it relates to me in this moment is that people have decided to make me a target versus all of us coming together to fight the system. And that's what they depend on. They depend on an attempt to assassinate the character of those who are actually doing the work. I mean, they did this to Dr. King, and I'm in no way even trying to compare myself.
No, but they did it to Dr. King, they did it to Malcolm X, and they did it to every single leader. Judas and the Black Messiah, you saw that. This is the narrative. We know
this
the narrative.
Is it. This is what
they do.
And it's scary. It's scary, Rob, because I mean, when I say scary, I guess if you understand what I mean when I say that, it's scary to watch history repeating itself, especially when it happens to be about you. Yeah. Because the one thing we know is that the tactic that some are playing into and the tactic that we see happening in this moment, it's not just discrediting people for the sake of discrediting them or discrediting me. It's also creating an environment for people to be isolated, disliked, and killed. Yeah, like that's what happens when you take so much time and invest in the constant belittling and degrading of a person. You begin to, and it happened to me in the Women's March, where I actually met several people since the Women's March across the world who I would run into or be in a mall or a grocery store or different places. And they would say, "Hi, are you Tamika Mallory?" And I say, "Yes." And they say, "Wow, you're so small." I'm 5'4", I'm 125. Well, I'm, since the pandemic, I'm a little bit more than that. But at that time, I was like 120, 115 pounds, but things changed. I'm also 40, so life is happening. But, they would say, "Wow, you're so small. I had this impression of you that you were like this big person," right? And it's not that I look big. My frame is small. Everyone can tell that. But the thing is, the media built me in a way that made me look like this monster, right? I'm anti-Semitic. I'm a racist. I'm a hater. I'm evil. I hate men, right? I'm this Black feminist that's against Black men.
It's like the totally opposite of you. If people know you.
You said it. And you've actually met me. That's the other part, is like these people who speak of me have never even sat down for one conversation, right? Not even one, right. And there are some who actually have talked to me and their impression of me is just whatever it is. And you can't do anything about that. But the point is that what we know from history is that all of it lends itself to to isolation. Yeah. That isolation of, we don't like her, she's a bad person, or he's a bad person. And similar to Angela Davis, the next thing you know, she's incarcerated. Similar to what we saw happen with Billie Holiday. If you talked about Judas and the Messiah, if people really want to watch a film that shows you what is so dangerous about speaking up, and she wasn't a big time activist. She had one song, Strange Fruit, one song. And the movie, The United States Against Billie Holiday, gives you a clear understanding of how serious it is that when unfortunately, I have to say, when white folks don't like you, what they will do to use your own people against you, and how you get isolated to the point that you're standing on your own, and then you're vulnerable to be killed.
Right. I mean, that's what they want, but it's not going to happen with you. We're going to speak this out into the universe.
Yeah, we're not going to.
Yeah, we're with you.
We're in a different place.
I mean, but it does require you to pay attention to it. This is why you have to be. We have to talk about it, and you do have to address these narratives, because you can't let them grow. Because if you don't say anything, then that becomes people believe it, right?
That is the story,
right? That's a story. I mean, I think the last 4 years have just shown us that, like, people can say whatever, and if you don't have an adequate response, people are like, well, maybe it's true. And after a while, what was seen as extreme it becomes normalized, and that's that's where we're going. That's not where we're going. That's where we are right now.
That's where we are,
right? And that's why we have to fight back so hard. As we talk about fighting back, you talked about holding Joe Biden accountable. You talked about you have a focus on, I know you do, about what the movement should be. I'm curious to know what should be, from your perspective, the focus of the movement, let's say for the next couple years, then a few years going forward. Is it holding the president accountable and pushing the Senate to actually do something? Is it at local levels in areas? You have some specific plans there. Like, where do you think the focus should be for the movement in the short term and the long term?
I think it's all of the above. I think you have to work on every single day building communities, right? And when I say that, what I mean is, while we, on one hand, call to defund the police, defunding the police only works if you have a strong community that is able to maintain and manage itself, right? And so we're not saying that there should be no police. We're not saying take all of them. We're not saying abolish the police, although I am an abolitionist, and I hope that one day we get to a point where, like many other countries, police officers are really there to serve, and they don't necessarily even need lethal force in order to be a part of that community. But you cannot have a system that minimizes the role and need for police if you have not been building the mental health and the physical health and and dealing with the issues of economic development, and dealing with poverty, and dealing with housing, and dealing with clean food and vegetables and access, right? You can't have that. So I think we always have to be 10 toes down around the idea of building our own communities and investing in grassroots organizations who often have solutions for what it looks like to sustain a community on its own, right? So that's one, has to happen. And it almost is one that stands by itself. This idea that we actually have everything we need. We just need to have the resources and take the time to actually focus on those things. I think the local elections, local politics, people running for office, people raising money in your local community so that when an elected official runs, a local elected official can run by saying, well, I stand for Black people. I believe in this cause. I want to do police reform. All this stuff. And then when they get deeply into their campaign, and even if they win into their tenure as an elected, they can't raise money from the same communities that they stood up for. Yep. And therefore they begin to lean towards those people who have helped to sustain them. Right.
That goes back to our earlier conversation about why it's hard to really make a movement if you don't have any resources when it comes down to it. Right. So we have to understand that we have to invest in our leaders. And we have to invest, not just voting, we have to vote all the time, vote locally, not just for presidential elections.
President, right.
And then give, even if it's $5, $10, if you have a good candidate, give to that. I've been a candidate. I know this is some hard stuff. And people look at it like, I ran statewide. It is hard. It is very hard. And I was very direct about what I was going to do in terms of criminal justice reform. That made me not popular with some of the local newspapers, whatever. Still, I got a ton of votes, but then there were a lot of people, how can you help? You can get out and give some money, even if it's $5, because that makes
it matters.
Right. It all matters. Right. And then I would tell people, like, in terms of if I had to crystal ball and I was in your position, there were some of these other national organizations, I do think there should be some focus on the Senate and on the president, and particularly a couple things, because to me, more people voted for Joe Biden and voted in his last election than ever in history, ever. So to me, they have to do some things specifically right now. One, they have to pass a strong voting rights bill. We know they are trying, right? And they need to get rid, and to me, all this stuff, they need to get rid of the filibuster. Like, there's no way to do any of this.
Well, at least Joe Biden said that that's something that he's focused on.
Right. So, that's good. I mean, that's good. And then that was
groundbreaking for him to even say.
I didn't even know
right.
That's good.
Did. The other day he spoke to
wonderful
trying to end the filibuster and saying that he was going to begin the process of figuring out like what it's going to take. It's not an easy thing, but he did say that. And you cannot ignore, while he may not admit it and his team may not come out and say it, the administration may never admit it in any way, but you can't ignore the fact that on Sunday on a Grammy speech, I say that, President Biden, we demand justice, equity, and policy. And then the next thing you know, in the very next week, he's talking about ending the filibuster, which is specifically geared towards how we will get the George Floyd Policing Act. It's Justice and Policing Act.
Basically, let's make sure we can have we can hold police accountable. We got to have some action from the Senate. We got to have action.
Absolutely.
But we also have to protect voting rights, because they're being. I mean, it's ridiculous, the bill they're trying to pass in Georgia. They're going to pass it. They're making it illegal to hand people food in line.
Well, in Kentucky, they're making it illegal for you to even speak to a police officer, like to say anything to them. It's called harassment or something like that. So
that's got to be unconstitutional.
There's always a backlash. There was a backlash to Obama being elected, President Obama being elected, and there's going to be a backlash to Joe Biden. There's always a backlash, and unfortunately, I think that the Asian community just experienced what that backlash looks like, and so we all have this common enemy, which is white supremacy. But as you were saying, yes, I do think that building local communities, people running for office, and also ensuring that we invest in elected officials is important. But as you said, from a Senate level and a federal level, we still have a lot of work to do. There are Democrats that need to be unseated as well, right?
There's no question about that.
What's his name? Manchin. He needs to be unseated, right? And so we have to look at the entire system and decide what are the points. And there are some people who say to me, well, we need to see you do more work on policy. Well, by the way, you haven't been paying attention if you don't know that we actually do policy work. That's one. We're now working across the country to get Breonna's law passed. In several places, the law has either been introduced or passed in general. Louisville, Kentucky is one of those places where our dear sister Keturah Haran was the leader in terms of getting it passed. And now Representative Attica Scott is working on the statewide level. I understand what I'm beginning to realize, Rob, is that people do not know how the movement works. They don't get it. So they don't know or understand that there are lanes, right? And everyone is in their lane.
There are lanes and there are layers.
There's lanes and layers, right? There's overpasses, right? There's tunnels. There's all of that. And the people who are policymakers are in their lane. The people like me who are advocates, mobilizers, educators who bring awareness to issues, help the policymakers to do the work that they're doing.
That's exactly right.
It doesn't mean I have dual skills, right? I bring a diversity of skills because I am politically savvy and I do work with legislators on a regular basis. But we should not look down upon activists who don't necessarily do policy work, but they're great organizers on the street.
Yep.
They help to bring the noise and keep the streets hot so that the legislator is able to say, this is what the people want.
Yep.
We have to pass these laws.
I always say there's three P's. There's definitely protest, which is where you're talking about. The next is policy, and then the one that's connected to that is power, because you got to have all three, right? You got to have all three to make systemic change, which really brings a lot of our conversation together. I know we're running short on time, so let me get just a couple of rapid fire questions I like to ask folks. So, what is can you think of a time when you were younger? Advice you would ignore? I'm sorry. If you were talking to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself, and what advice would you ignore?
Well, for one, I think, and it's still relevant today. To me, at 40 years old, I'm still always trying to figure out who is they? Who is they? Because we love to say they're not going to like it. They're going to say they don't think I'm, fit for the job. They don't think I'm pretty. They don't think I'm this. Who is they? Right? We have to be able to identify the theys, because sometimes theys can be just in our mind, but also we have to recognize that the theys that we're listening to are people who will never be with you. So if they say you're not attractive and you change everything about yourself, they're going to say, oh, now you look worse. They're never, ever, 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 ever going to accept you or be on your side. And so you have to accept who you are, stand firmly in your position, and know that you can't win everyone and that the days have been sent to distract you. Someone told me the other day, a sister by the name of Marvette Brito, who's a brand strategist. She's worked with everybody from Mariah Carey to you name the people. And she called me up in light of some of the recent tension that I have been dealing with. And she said, there are 4 words that I need you to write down on a piece of paper. She said, number 1 is distraction. Number 2 is deceit. Number 3 is dislocation. And the 4th one is destruction. So once you have been distracted, it is easy for people to move in and deceive you. And once you have been deceived, you can be dislocated from where you are supposed to be. And once you've been dislocated, then you can be destroyed.
Wow.
And all of that, it comes from having they be the loudest voices in your mind sometimes. And so I tell younger people, and I would tell myself, stop listening to they, because they have made me not go to school when I was supposed to. They made me, not believe in myself. They made me procrastinate. They did a lot of things to me, and yet I still don't know who they are.
That was good. That was great advice. Listen to that advice, dude. That was good. That was really good. All right. So final 2 questions. You got a committee of 3, living or dead, to advise you on business, life, whatever. Who are those 3 people and why?
Well, my mom is alive and my dad, but let's put them as one. My parents, they matter in terms of advising me. I'd say this, I already chose my parents, but my son or young people in general matter, right? You gotta have young people on your team that help you to stay fresh, current, new, and also that are honest. Because young people, my son is brutally honest with me, but all the young people I work with are just very, very, very honest. And I think the 3rd person for me would be Michelle Obama. I would want to hear from her about what it is to do the go high thing. Because sometimes I want to go real, real, real low. And I've seen.
I love her. I don't even necessarily agree with the whole statement. I think you got to go direct. I love her though.
You know what? It's working. It works for her.
It does.
And
it does.
I'd love to hear and to have her constant advice about how to manage the moments when you really just want to punch somebody in their face. Yeah. Right? Because I know she has wanted to do that.
Oh, I'm sure. I can feel it.
You can see it. Yeah, you can see it.
You can see it because, But she always took the high road, and I don't know. I know I couldn't. I'm just not that good. But
yeah, I'm.
Final question: you have an ad or a Google ad, let's say, that summarizes Tamika Mallory's life or beliefs. What is that saying and why?
So I think similar to Shirley Chisholm's that says Unbought and Unbossed, I would want mine to say Tamika Mallory, she tried.
Yeah.
She tried.
All right. Tamika Mallory, pleasure to have you on.
It's great to be with you, Rob. Thank you so much.
Thank you.